Okay, our speaker today is Kurt Weiss. He's the father of Mitch Weiss, who's our executive director. Kurt was born in Austria, and he's going to talk to us today about how he managed to escape Austria after Hitler invaded, and his life in the United States and his career. So with that, I don't want to give away his secrets, so I'd like to introduce Kurt Weiss.
Thank you, Judy. I appreciate the introduction. Es freut mich sehr und ich möchte euch alle ein sehr gutes neues Jahr wünschen. That means I wish you all a good, happy new year. I'm also trying to impress you that I speak a little German. Okay, here we go. I was born on February 7th, 1930, in a little town called Krems on the Danube, Krems on the Donau. About an hour and a half to 2 hours outside of Vienna, which was the capital of Austria. I had a mother, a father, a grandfather on my father's side, who had 9 brothers and sisters. My paternal grandmother also had a very large family. On my mother's side, I only know my grandfather and my grandmother. They had children, 4 children. My mother was the youngest. Every Sunday, we would get together, the entire family, at my grandfather's, my paternal grandfather's farm, so to speak. He had about 15 to 20 acres of land, and he grew all sorts of different products, wheat, rye, and so forth. He had a granary, and he made his money selling all his stuff. He had a warehouse with loads of sacks piled up, and I and my friend Hansi used to run on top of the sacks and jump from pile to pile playing tag. Fond memories. Well, I had a very enjoyable time in Krems, and when I was 4 years old, my parents moved to Vienna. We moved into a lovely home right on the main street. I think I remember the name. I'm not 100% sure. But anyway, it was a great place. My mother's father, my grandfather, Baron Joseph Popper. He was a baron. He was ein Kaiserlicher Rat, which means he was an adjutant to the Kaiser. And he walked around in a uniform with epaulettes. And I remember every Wednesday he would come to my house in Vienna. Vienna is a city of 22 or 23 districts. They call them Bezirke. He lived in the 1st Bezirk. We lived in the 16th. My other grandfather lived in the 22nd, which was almost outside of town. I just want to give you the difference in location. And he would come with his uniform every Wednesday and take me to the movies. I loved him. He was terrific. My grandmother, I didn't know too much, but she taught me gin rummy. She was sick. She was in bed. And I remember hopping up on her bed, and she took out a deck of cards, and she showed me how to play. I'm now losing money. Anyhow, I went to school. I went to public school. And it was, well, the classroom was decorated with crosses. We had a period at the end of the class that was directed to prayer. And we said our prayers. Now, I was the only Jew in the class. And I was told by my father, by the way, my father was I have to tell you a little bit about him, but he was a very strict disciplinarian. I could never be as strict as he was, but he was really hard guy. And he told me, no way ever do you take part in these prayers because you're Jewish. His great-grandfather was the chief rabbi of Vienna. So they passed on the Jewishness down to him, and he tried with me. So here I am. Okay. I can't show you anything else. Come on. Where was I? In school. And I studied. I was good. I was a kid who was bright. I was very fortunate. I did my homework, and it was a pleasure. It was easy for me. Now, my father and his sister and his father opened up a business, a wine and liquor business. They sold alcohol. They had 9 retail stores throughout Vienna. And he traveled all around selling more stuff. He had a chauffeur and a car, and the chauffeur would come, pick him up, and they would go for rides. I used to stand and wave to him. I remember that. So while this was going on, I went to school and had a good time, and everything was wonderful. And my mother decided she would entertain or help some of the neighborhood kids who sometimes didn't have enough to eat. She would invite them to our house on Saturdays. Saturdays for lunch. Lunch in Vienna was the big meal. Like here it is supper time. In Vienna, it was lunch. So we had maybe 9 or 10 or 12 kids sitting around the table, and everybody had a great time. And this went from week to week to week to week. And one day, I'm standing in my living room, and I'm looking out the window, and I hear noise. So I go closer and closer, and I look out, and I see, believe it or not, soldiers marching. And they were marching in step, big steps, and their right hands were raised, like thus. And I'm watching. I said, Mama, was ist das? And so she came and she says, ich weiß nicht. She doesn't know. So we looked, and all of a sudden we saw an open field car. You know what a field car is? It has no top. And in the front was a little guy with a mustache. And he looked like this. This is my buddy. So that was my first introduction to Adolf Hitler. And from then on, things started to get terrible. People were taken off the streets. Vans rolled around, and you saw more and more people in black uniforms. Now, what did that mean? People who wore brown uniforms were called the SA, the SA. They were standard soldiers. The ones with the black uniforms and the swastikas, that was the SS. And there were more and more of these guys. And they started picking up people on the street, asking them if they were Jewish. And if they were Jewish, the doors opened up on these vans, and they went up and disappeared. Well, everybody in my family started to get scared. When I say scared, I mean really scared. My father was petrified. One day, I was in pajamas, and I was ready to go to bed when there was a loud knocking on the door. My mother and I ran to the door, and there was my father. Let me in, let me in. He came in, he didn't say hello, he didn't say hi, he didn't say anything. He ran and he hid in the bedroom under his bed. 5 minutes later, there was another knocking or banging on the door. And we walked to the front door, opened it up, and there were 3 SS soldiers. Well, I was scared. I don't want to use the word, but really, I was really scared. I grabbed my mother's skirt. And one of the guys says, "We're after your husband. Is your husband home?" And my mother said, "No, he's not home." "Come on, let us in to check." "No, you can't come in. You can't come in." And the guy goes and he takes out his gun and he points it at my mother. And he says, "If you don't open up the door, I'm going to pull this trigger." And I could see his finger is getting close. And the guy standing next to him pushes his hand up, and the gun goes off. The guy who stood next to him was the father of one of the kids who came to lunch on Saturdays. He was the butcher. So, thanks to him, I'm standing here telling you a story. The gun went off, and he said, by the way, the noise was unbelievable. If you've never heard a gun, and I'm telling this story as if I was 8 years old. It was a loud roar. And he says to my mother, "Look, we're going to be back in 3 hours. Your husband better be home." Now that was smart of him, because that gave us time to take off. They turned around and they walked away. We went into the house, went into the bedroom. My father came out, we sat there, and we had a conference. And they decided they were going to leave. So everybody got a suitcase, and I was told to pack my suitcase. I don't know what to put in it. Should I put in toys? Should I put in pants? Should I put in a shirt? Or what? I got help. And then we took off. How did we take off? We went on a roof. And while we were on the roof, we could see an SS guy walking around our block. And when he turned the corner, we ran down the other side and got downstairs on the street. My mother decided she was going to go to her parents and say goodbye. My father said, we're going to my parents in the other direction. So he grabbed my hand and off we went. And we walked and walked and walked until at night, until we got to my grandfather's house. It must have been 5 miles, 10 miles, I don't know. It was a long time. And we got there. I'll never forget that incident because it really, I was young and very impressionable. I got there and we slept in the barn in the back. My grandfather had a big pond where he had geese and ducks, and he had pigs and horses and chicken, and it was a regular farm. And we stayed in that place. Now, believe it or not, they sent me to school. When I got back to school, instead of letting me into class, they sent me to an all-Jewish school. So I was not the only Jew, but we were all Jewish children in that class. And on the wall was the picture of a swastika. And whenever it was time for religion, we had to get up and not our Father who art in heaven, but Sieg Heil. It was terrible. And I couldn't say no because, hey, you can't say no to these people. Anyway, so I kept going to school. I learned a little bit, but my grades went down. I was an all-1 student. A 1 is equivalent to an A. And my report cards in the 1st and 2nd grade were A, straight through. I'm bragging, but it's true. When I went to 3rd grade, all of a sudden I started getting 2s. And my father, that was no good for my father. He was very upset. My father was a guy who graduated from the University of Vienna. He spoke 4 or 5 languages: Czech, Hungarian, German, French, a little Italian. My mother spoke French and she played the piano. She was a very, what's the word? Well, whatever. And 2s were no good for my father. But that was the case. While we were at my grandfather's place, they made up and said, we're going to come to America. You know, the word America at that time was like somebody saying the land of Oz. You really never knew what America was. You heard a little bit, but nobody ever really knew. We had no friends here. We didn't speak the language. We had no relatives here. Nothing. But he wanted to go. So what he did is he applied for a passport for the 3 of us, and he got it. And then all of a sudden came the word, you need a visa. Now, what did that mean? That meant that someone in the United States had to be your sponsor. What did that mean? Somebody had to put up $500, put it in the bank so that in case we became a burden on the state, they would have some money to help. Well, how do we get this visa? We don't know anybody in America. Once again, my father's intellect came through. He went to the American consulate and he got a telephone directory and he ripped out the page of Weiss's and he brought it home. And he sat down and he wrote a letter asking for each Weiss to sponsor us. Believe it or not, I kid you not, we got one response. And that's all we needed. One guy said, yes, I'll sponsor you. Now, it didn't cost him anything because the money was safe. But all he had to do was just take the money from here and put it into a bank. He did that. My father took it to the consulate. They got the visas. Now, all three of us had to go to the consulate. We went. And that was a hairy situation, too. We had to get the chauffeur to take us because we couldn't walk on the street. We got to the American consulate and we were introduced to the consul. And he's a nice young guy, but he gave us a test. We had to take a test. It was an IQ test. My father and I passed this test 1, 2, 3. What was the test? It was a block of wood with holes in it. These holes had different shapes. One was a triangle, one was a rectangle, one was a cylinder, one was a circle, and there were some geometric shapes. And you had to take the shapes and put them into the right holes. And the guy was standing there with his timer, and you had to do it in so many seconds. My father and I, perfect. My mother screwed up. She was so nervous. She dropped it. She didn't do it. So the guy turns around and says, okay, you can go to America, and you can't. So we stood and we looked at each other. Then my father says to me, Kurt, that's me, let's go to the bathroom. So the two of us went to the bathroom and we're peeing and we're standing next to one another. And he says to me, what are we going to do? And I said, Papa, let's ask the man to give Mama another chance. Maybe he can give it a test again and she'll pass it. And that's exactly what happened. We went back. He asked the guy to give my mother another test, and this time she passed it. And we got our visas. So that's the first step. We were in pretty good shape. Are you guys all with me, or am I putting you to sleep? Okay, I know I'm putting you to sleep, Mitchell.
I think he's heard the story a couple
Oh, yeah, a couple times. After I'm finished, I'll open it up for questions and answers. This was 1938, and when we left, it was 1939. By the way, some of you may have read in the paper or heard on TV that some countries don't believe in the Holocaust. I am the living proof that the Holocaust existed, because otherwise I would not be standing here. So it happened. Okay. Now we've decided we're going to leave. We have to make preparations. Now, we were a wealthy family. We had lots and lots of money, and my mother had an abundance of jewelry. So my father bought cans of Ovaltine, which is like cocoa. And he opened up the cans, dug a hole, and put her jewels, bracelets, necklaces, rings, earrings, all this stuff into these cans. We had a cousin, my mother's sister's kid, Fritz, who lived in Paris. And they sent it to Fritz. Then she took her most favorite piece of jewelry, which was a humongous diamond, and she had a fox. I don't know what they call it, but she had a fox, a stole. There you go. And she took the eye out of the fox, and she put the diamond into the eye. Smart, right? Well, my father didn't think so. He said, no way. That looks so terrific. They're going to catch it for sure, and then we're dead. You can't do it. And there was a big argument. And as usual, he won. And that piece of jewelry went into another can. And the can was shipped. Well, now comes our trip. We had the passports. We had the visas. We went to the train station in downtown Vienna, Bahnhof. And am I right? Yeah, Bahnhof, you know. And we got on the train, the three of us. Each one had one suitcase. We had very little money. We were only allowed, according to the American custom, $10 each. And money was given to my grandfather. Now, one of the things before we go to the train station, and I should tell you a little bit about it, I had never seen my father cry, ever. And before we left, he said goodbye to his mother and father and his sister, and he was crying. I can't tell you how I felt. I thought my insides were coming out. But they said goodbye, and we took off. We went to the train station. The train came. We got on. Now, you don't know, but in Europe, they have a custom. The conductors of the train are the nationals of the state that the train moves in. So the conductors for that train were Austrians, and they were dressed in Austrian garb. They had on lederhosen, leather pants with a hish, a deer in the front, and they were dressed like Austrians. And we were sitting there, and the train was moving. All of a sudden, we got through Austria, and we came to Germany. The train stopped, and the Austrian conductors left, and the German conductors came on the train. When my father saw the German conductors, he ran. And he ran to the end of the car and disappeared. My mother and I sat there, we looked at each other, we didn't know what to say. The conductor came, "Where are your papers?" We gave him the papers, he looked at them. Okay, gave it back to us, and away he went. Then the train continued, and came to the French border. And the Frenchmen came on board. The Germans left. And all of a sudden, out of the blue, my father appeared. He had jumped from the car onto the connecting link between the two trains and sat there while the train was moving. Unbelievable. Came back on. So now we're together again as a family. The joy was fantastic. We stopped in Switzerland and got off the train. Then my father decided he needed more money. So he found a charity house, I don't know from where, and he took grime, dirt, from the street and put it all over my face. And he said, we're going to go and talk to this person, and when I wink at you, you start to cry. Well, the two of us went upstairs. My mother waited down below. We spoke to this woman, and he winked at me, and I started to cry. And she gave him 300 Swiss francs. Fantastic. All right, we continued. We ended up in Paris. We got off the train, and lo and behold, there's my cousin Fritz. And the first words out of my mother's mouth was, "Did you get the Ovaltine?" And guess what? He said, "No, I didn't." Gone with the wind. So we got over that shock. My mother was crying all night. And I learned, we stayed in a small apartment that he had provided for us where there was a slot machine, and I was playing the slots. We stayed about a week or so, and then we traveled to the port city of Le Havre. Le Havre is on the coast of France. This was in July of 1939. I'm getting to the end. Don't get spilkes. It's all right. Okay, we got to Le Havre, and we got on the ship. On a ship, you have different grades. The rich people lived up there, the poor people lived down there. We weren't the poorest. We were third class. So we were in third class. We had it was tight living aboard a ship, and that's one of the reasons I don't go on cruises. Because this thing was swaying and swaying. It took 11 days before we hit land. But believe it or not, one day I saw the Statue of Liberty. While I was aboard ship, my father and I had a book called McKellen, How to Read English. And I learned a couple things. One was a proverb that said, never put off till tomorrow what you can do today. All right. It sounded so strange, but I was able to read it, understand it, and it was great. I read English. There was also another thing. They played a song, and I didn't know what the song meant. The name of the song was Roll Out the Barrel. I said, what are they talking about? Anyway, we got to New York. We did not land at Ellis Island. We landed at Canal Street. We got off and we walked on USA soil. Felt just like any other Earth, but we were in America. We couldn't believe it. They put us up in a place called the Weiss. You heard of that? Hebrew Immigration Aid Society. That's a godsend. If you want to contribute money, that's a nice thing to do. I don't know how many refugees you have there now, but at that time, it was loaded and loads of people came to this place. Well, anyhow, we stayed there. My father got a job. He had a hand clipper. He went into the men's room and cut hair for nickels at first. I went to work for a blind man who sold fruit at a fruit stand, and he would give me fruit to eat as my pay. The food at the Weiss was minimal. It was a meal, but you could hardly say it was a meal. I was always hungry. Then my father advanced. He had been, see, he didn't speak the language, so it was difficult for him to communicate. He had been an artist as a side hobby. He was excellent. He went to school in Holland. What was it? Rembrandt School for Art. And he did paintings. And he got a job as a painter, a house painter. All right? So he came home every day filthy. My mother, the Countess, got a job on the east side, downtown, in a sweatshop, sewing handbags, plastic handbags. And they did this for years. And we ended up moving to an apartment on the east side in the Bronx. And I went to school in the Bronx, a place called PS2. Now, I don't know if anybody around who went to PS2. There you go. Third, that's correct. All right, so you know I'm not making it up. I went there and I graduated, and I was supposed to go to a junior high school called PS 55, but we moved. We moved from the East Bronx to the West Bronx. Now, we lived on Grand Avenue in the Bronx, which was near Burnside Avenue. We lived on the 4th floor of a walk-up apartment. And my mother would hang out her head out the window when I was playing stickball in the streets. I was not a 3-sewer man. 2, but not 3. And she would call me my name. Now, she called me Kuti. And all my friends called me Kuti. I still have a couple of these guys who are hanging around. So I played, and I grew up. I did well in junior high school. I went to PS 79. I was the captain of the guards. The what? The monitors. The monitors, not the guards. The monitors. I got a thing. And I graduated, and I went to a high school called DeWitt Clinton, which was on Marshula Parkway And unfortunately, it was an all-boys school. I made the basketball team, and I know. But at that time, there were no tall guys. Now you have them 7 foot. At that time, a guy with 6 foot was terrific. By the way, I shrunk 2 inches in the last 10 years. So I graduated school and I went to CCNY. I entered into the School of Technology. I studied to become a chemical engineer. I graduated in June of '53 with a chemistry degree. At that time, there was such a thing as the Korean War. And I got a deferment. Why? Because I got a job at the Army Ordnance Ammunition Command in Dover, New Jersey, called Picatinny Arsenal. I worked on hand grenades for 3 years. Then I went to work for a couple of other companies, Reichhold Chemicals, Ionac Chemicals, and a company called BASF, which was a German firm. They hired me because I could speak, read, and write German. Because at home, I always spoke German. I never spoke English to my parents, except in company. So I got that job. And I did pretty well. They made me director of manufacturing. I was in charge of 7 chemical plants. We manufactured expandable polystyrene and other chemicals, stuff that never was a batch process. It was always a continuous process. So you kept on pumping in fuel and you got out product. You kept on pumping in raw material and out came the finished goods. And that lasted for close to 20 years. Well, basically, at that time when I went to work for them, I met a lovely young lady who was 17, and I was 22, and we fell in love, and she got better looking every day, and I loved her more and more every single day. We had 2 kids in Clifton, New Jersey. We had an apartment there, $46 a month rent. Then we bought a house in Edison, New Jersey, and we had 2 more kids. So you don't know what having 4 kids is like. My son knows. Oh, you have 6. Congratulations. And our kids grew up. And they went to school. And today, I'm very, very proud to say, each one of my children is working in the field that they studied. One was a VP of finance for 30 years. One is a VP for a company and is running the dental program for a company called Emblem, which used to be HIP. Another one is a pharmacist who works for himself as a pharmaceutical auditor and audits 3,000 pharmacies in the state of Pennsylvania. And my baby is a 3rd grade teacher who's got over 25 years experience and is a big shot with the state. So all is well. Fortunately, I have 8 grandchildren. Unfortunately, They're all the same sex. I was dying for a little boy. I gotta wait. I have 8 beautiful girls, and they're all great. And here I am. And basically, that's the end of my story. Any questions?
The other members of the family, were they able to come to America? Your fathers and your mothers?
We need the question.
2.
What?
2 other members.
I have 2 cousins. They sent my cousin Herb, who was 17. He was my father's sister's only son. They sent him to London. And he went from London to New York. He became a big wheel for a pharmaceutical firm. And the other one was my mother's brother's kid who went to London, and he went to work for DuPont and ran a plant there. Yes?
Sure if I missed it, but did you say you were your only child of your parents?
We had we had a policy in our family. At that time, Jewish families only had 1 child. So my mother, my aunt, all the other aunts, they only had 1 child, and everybody was wiped out. I have a grave in the cemetery in Vienna with all the names of all the people who passed away. And I pay every year a little something for the upkeep. Yes?
You indicated that you left Vienna overnight, so to speak, and indicated also that your father was wealthy, very wealthy, had a number of liquor stores,
Yes.
et cetera, et cetera. What happened to the money?
It disappeared.
There was no opportunity for him to try to...
Okay, no. No. He gave all his money to his father, and his father ended up in concentration camp. They took everything.
Did you ever meet Mr. Weiss, who sponsored you?
Oh! I forgot to tell you that story. Okay. I told you about my father. He was a very bright, frightened man. When we came here, 3 months afterwards, he called up this guy, a Weiss, and made an appointment to see him. He lived on 5th Avenue. We went there, opened up the door. There was a buffet spread out. Fantastic. I had gotten instructions. If he offers you something, refuse, say no. So I came into this place and said, no thank you, no thank you, no thank you, no thank you, no thank you. He said thank you to this man, shook his hand, turned around and walked out. That was the last time we ever saw him. He never called him again, never said anything about it again. That's it.
Was there a reason not to maintain?
Too proud.
Too proud.
Too proud.
Thanks very much for listening. I gotta sit down.
He's going to sit down.
Wait.
You mentioned that your great-great-grandfather was a rabbi in Vienna. Do you remember his name?
Stronsky, Joseph Stronsky.
Thank you.
He has a book. You have a book about it.
Let's see, think for a second. I've read several books, similar subjects, okay, of people leaving. We're actually reading a book now from the library about a similar story. I would like to know, in thinking about this in hindsight, where you were close to your grandfather or grandmother? One of them, right? You learned to play gin rummy.
Right.
Okay. Think about this before. If she wasn't alive, and you hadn't had that relationship, okay, you didn't learn to play gin rummy, how do you think your life would have been different? What kind of effect would she have had on your life?
Have more money.
Well, first of all, because my parents loved their parents, I loved their parents also. They gave a lot of their love to their respective parents. And those respective parents treated me beautifully. They always commended me, and whenever I did something, they applauded. Not just silently, but loudly and vocally. So they made me feel close.
They had a positive effect on your being an adult?
Absolutely.
Make you a better father, husband.
I started to sweat.
Was your father's name Weiss, or was it changed?
My father's name was Egon Walter Weiss. Now the Weiss comes from Hungary, and it was spelled with a sharp S, which was a separate letter in the Hungarian alphabet. When we came to the United States, they don't have a sharp S, so it was turned into a double S.
It was that way in Vienna too, wasn't it?
This is a common question. I've read this a lot. Sometimes people have answers and sometimes they don't. People here in this country don't understand, ask this question a lot. Maybe you know, maybe you don't know. Why is it people didn't leave earlier? I mean, it's a mystery. Some did, some didn't.
Would you leave your home?
Well, there are many reasons. I have to tell you that when I was on my honeymoon with my wife, we went to Cuba. I was in a restaurant, and a guy sat across the way from us and came over to us, or came over to me, and said, by the way, what do you do for a living? And I said, I'm a chemical engineer. He said, I own a chemical company in South Africa and Johannesburg, and I would like to offer you a job there with a maid, with a car, and with a house. And I said, no, thank you. My parents are here, and I will not leave them. He didn't break my hands or anything. I just said, I will not leave my parents alone.
So the answer is that because family was there, they wouldn't leave the family.
Correct.
Okay.
Well, your mother said it could never happen in Vienna. Your mother-in-law also said that, didn't she?
Kurt, I'd like to ask you a question about Anschluss. Everybody thinks that Hitler marched into Austria. I've read some preliminary work, I haven't been done with it yet, that they actually voted him in because there was anarchy in Austria at the time prior to the entry of Hitler. Is that true? Or I'd like your comment.
I can't say it's true or not true. All I can tell you is what I saw. And I saw Hitler ride through the main street during Anschluss. And during Anschluss, they took red paint and painted the windows of my father's stores with gallows with Jews hanging from them, and they called them Jude. And he did come through our main street. He came right past my house. So I'm telling you, this happened. And it was not a fairy tale. I was there to see it. I don't know what political maneuvers were held before, after, or during, but it was, Anschluss means annexation. And I'm sure that politically they annexed Austria. Now, if you want to call it a vote, that vote was, if it was taken, was a farce. Because their army was there. They would take it over whether they voted or not.
My parents came to this country from Romania in 1922. Shortly after that, they closed the immigration borders. And then in 1935, my father heard through sources, and he went on a boat to Romania to warn his family about Hitler, and they didn't listen. They were well off in Romania, and they wound up in the concentration camp. Their kids came to Israel. But this is a curious thing. When my parents came to America, they had to go through Ellis Island. I wondered why you landed, it landed, and they went to Canal Street and didn't go the normal route through Ellis Island. It was closed.
It was closed.
That's what I figured, because they closed the borders.
No, they didn't close the borders. People came in, but they closed Ellis Island.
Oh, I see. So it was okay to land in Canal Street?
Yes.
Two questions. One, can you talk to us about your parents, how long they lived, and also do you have a recipe for a Hungarian cookie, bogaches? Bogacha?
No, I don't have the recipe.
There's no recipe, but let me interject here and give my dad a break here. I was fortunate enough to have my 4 grandparents at my wedding. My grandmother and grandfather.
And how long are you married, Mitch?
I'm married 31 years.
Get it right?
Get it right. My grandfather, besides my father, is the brightest man that I've ever met. He was a small guy. His hands were like bricks because he painted for over 50 years in New York. And he painted every apartment house possible. I swear to you. And his hands, and to this day, we still have a paintbrush of his because it was thick, it was heavy, it was hard, and he was brilliant. And he taught me how to play chess. And I've heard this story 1,002 times. Today I'm 1,003 times. And my grandmother was a very unique individual. Her strength about her, when she walked into a room, people will just know that she was a presence and she was someone to reckon with. Okay, and she was just incredible. And they treated me as the first grandson. It was great. Every time my parents would want to go away and go on vacation, I would go into the Bronx, into Grand Avenue, and play with them. We used to go out on day trips into Manhattan all the time. Radio City and so forth. And then when they got in years, they decided to move out of the Bronx, and they moved to Queens, into Forest Hills, which for them was like you're going out into the country.
Yeah.
And one of the nice things about moving out to Forest Hills in Queens, they met a lot of Viennese folks. So they started talking more and more German Viennese with their friends. And it so happened that when they were there for a longer period of time, they decided to be a snowbird. And they ventured down to Daytona Beach. And a lot of their friends from Forest Hills in the Bronx also moved to Daytona Beach as snowbirds. And for me, because I went to school down here at the University of Tampa, I had the opportunity to see them every other weekend and spend Shabbat with them. So for me, it was great. My grandfather was my inside tutor because he tutored me and all my education from college. So it was great. So I had, my grandfather lived until he was 84 years old. My grandmother lived until she was 86. My other grandfather lived until he was 87, and my other grandmother lived until she was 92. I was 29 years old, and I had 4 grandparents on my side, and I was blessed to have 1 grandmother from my wife's side who was still alive. So I had 5 grandparents at my wedding. So it was great. Jerry.
2 quick questions. Number 1, does the Austin passport identify the religion of the holder on the passport? Number 1. And number 2, as a fellow alumnus of David Clinton High School, what year did you graduate?
What year did you graduate, Dean Clinton?
1948.
And you talked about the passport.
Oh, Sarah in Israel.
Oh, your question was about the passports? Well, I still have the passports. I didn't bring them because they're back in New Jersey, but I have them, and if you want copies, I can give you copies. But the passports show the pictures of my respective parents. Underneath my father's name, it was the word Israel and a swastika stamp. Underneath my mother's picture was the word Sarah and a swastika. And her name was Elizabeth, and they called her Liesel. And they knew the Von Trapp family.
Thank you. Thank you, Kurt. That was wonderful.